Brent and Ryan in the morning. Good morning, I'm Brent.
And I'm Ryan.
This is
Brent and Ryan in the morning.
Welcome, it's Friday, April the 12th. And here we go. Guess what, Ryan?
One more
week
week
to go. One more week, that's
Wow.
it. And if you have made it this far, congratulations, way to go. I mean,
Only one book of the Bible left
one.
in the
And
New Testament.
unfortunately, it's kind of a challenging book, but there's only one left. And if you've gotten this far,
You can do it.
You can do it. We know you can. Yeah. You know, as we finish this week, we've now read the Gospel of John and the letters of John,
Right.
1st, 2nd, and 3rd John.
Yeah.
All of those, 2 of those, which were very easy reads.
Yeah, I like those.
Yeah, those days were easy. But you know what I loved as we began reading? We began with the resurrection, the scene at the tomb where they find out Jesus is gone. And what I love the best, it's you and me.
Absolutely.
It's you and me. You know
Peter
it is.
and John.
Who can run the fastest?
That's right. And you know who won? The author of the book.
Well, the one that Jesus loved, he doesn't identify. Well, let's show a little humility here.
Yeah, until the end. And then you're like, oh, he was better in all these ways.
And I'm thinking as I read this, you've got that whole last restoration of Peter, which is a really great moment where, he's denied Jesus and Jesus is restoring him back and showing him forgiveness and grace and all this. But man, John does not leave that out.
No, he wants to make sure. Peter was the one who cut off the ear.
Yep.
Peter was the one who denied
Jesus.
Denied him, not once or twice like the other Gospels. All three, and I'm going to give you the details. I'm going to make sure you get the whole story. It was just a little weak servant girl.
And not only that, as Jesus talks to Peter and says, hey, I want you to, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, all this. And Peter's like, well, what about that guy? Well, who do you think he was talking about?
Yeah.
John. And John's like, oh, Jesus said, don't worry about me. You just worry about yourself, Peter. It's amazing we didn't see more of that in Peter's writings, right? And just kind of calling out John.
Well, that's because Peter wasn't the actual author. If he wanted his perspective to make it look best, he needed to write his own book.
Sure. Yeah. So we get here to the physical resurrection, and we see some really interesting things, right?
Yeah. John carries a lot of after Jesus is resurrected, these stories that show us what it looks like for Jesus to both be resurrected and have a physical body.
Because he's the same as he was, but not quite.
But he's not, they don't recognize him. They think he was the gardener at the tomb.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
it takes him saying Mary's name before she really is like, oh my goodness, it's Jesus.
And he walks through walls. So we're like, does he even have a body? But then they touch him. They touch him, and they see that the holes are still in his hands from being crucified. And then they have the scene where he's cooking on the beach, and it says that they were afraid to ask him who he was because they knew, but they didn't know. They didn't know.
Yeah. But that leads to an interesting kind of pivot here because as John makes all these statements in his gospel, when we get to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, there's something really interesting taking place. Now, this is, several decades after Jesus has left, so we're getting probably, 60, 70, 80 AD. And there's a problem rising up in the church, and it's this problem where there's a group of people going around teaching that Jesus was not actually here physically, that he was just a spirit being.
Ghost.
Yeah, he was a ghost. And so that's why as you read 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, he is really adamant about saying, no, Jesus was physically here. He had a real physical body, and even after the resurrection, there was something physical about it. Not all the way physical, a little different, but there was something definitely physical about it there.
Yeah, John brings out a lot of stuff about the spiritual realms, I feel like. He doesn't call it that.
He continues his light and dark thing,
right?
Because his gospel, it's there, and then in 1 John,
right,
it's there
and
too.
he talks about that, and we were talking about the antichrist, and so many people hear that title, especially in America, and go, who is that? And I mean, we
try to identify it, don't we?
Yeah,
it's like, it's this
who the president is and your political party. Normally, we can identify what you might think.
That's right.
But John uses it, little a antichrists, plural, with the S at the end. Basically, anybody who's not for Jesus and is of the world is an antichrist who's opposed to Jesus. And so he just draws this big cosmic struggle between followers of Jesus and the rest of the world. And he's telling us, persevere, stay strong.
And not only that, but he's also saying, look, there is a determining factor between those who are following Jesus and those who don't. And it's this one word, it's obedience.
Yeah.
We talked about in James, how James says very much, if you think you have faith, but you can't see it, it isn't faith. And John basically says the same thing about love. He says, you can say you have love, but if you're not demonstrating that love, if that love is not lived out, you can just gab your lips all you want, and it doesn't mean anything, because true love, the love that has been poured into us by God, will be lived out in the actions that we live each and every day.
Right.
And I think that's so vital.
And when he wrote that in the letters, we absolutely saw that on Monday's reading, I believe, in John 14, 15, 16, where he says, if you love me, you'll obey my commands. If you don't love me, you won't obey my commands. So he's consistent when John's talking about this.
Yeah, he sure is. You know, there was one other thing that John said in his book that I thought that just really stuck out to me, because I think it really kind of highlights a challenge in evangelism sometimes, especially from probably my generation and older. John makes this statement. He says, fear of punishment shows we have not fully experienced his perfect love. And as I read that, I thought, I wonder how many times in the past we would, as I told you earlier, try to scare the hell out of people. And if you know what I mean by saying that, I mean, what we're doing is we preach hell and how horrible it's going to be and the eternal fires of damnation and everything.
Can I tell you a fun story?
Oh, please, especially if it's about hell.
When I was 16 years old, we had heaven's gates and hell's flames come through my church. And I was one of the high school kids that was drinking when we got into a car accident. We all died. I went to hell. The lights went dark. The red lights went out. The scary music and the sounds of screaming went on. And demons ran out in black clothing and dragged me away off the set to make sure that every 16-year-old in that room.
Very well. I would love, if Ryan's mom, if you have a video or a picture of that,
I had some theatrical chops.
Send that to me. I would love to share that on the church Facebook page if I could.
But that's exactly what, especially in the 80s and the 90s, that's what evangelism looked like.
If you were to die tonight and you were to stand before God and he were to say, why should I let you into my heaven? What would you say? I mean, that's really a question to evoke fear. And let me just qualify this by saying, I'm not saying it's wrong or sinful. What I am saying, though, is we need to be cautious that if that is the only motivating thing that we have to get people to follow Jesus, it may say more about us and our misunderstanding of what Jesus really means and does for us than it does anything else. Right. And so I love that fear of punishment shows we've not fully experienced his perfect love, because we don't have to be afraid of the fires of hell when we see how amazing and awesome Jesus truly is. And so I love that as John ends with that one.
Yep.
But you know what, Ryan? We've talked about resurrection and we've talked about hell. And so one of the things is coming up this Sunday.
Just 2 days from now.
2 days from now, we are actually going to complete our series called The Big Three, Life's Biggest Questions. And I'm going to be preaching a message on what happens after you die. And so what about heaven? What about hell? It's going to be fun.
I can't wait. I'm not sure what you're going to say. And I work with you every day.
I know. It's going to be, I think it'll be enlightening. And I think, as we try to do in most of our series, sometimes we come down very narrow in a theological position. And I hope as I teach on this Sunday, that maybe we see that there's a little bit more width in that theological position, that you can still love and follow Jesus, and maybe not necessarily be this one way, but there might be some other options there that we can see that what happens after we die. And hopefully we'll be able to address most of the questions that people have, because that's a big question. What happens after I die?
Yeah. So we hope to see you there.
That's right, Sunday, 9:15 or 10:45. So, all right, another great episode. 1 week left. You can do this. It's going to be amazing. So it's Monday. You're going to start with Revelation, and we'll be back next week to talk about it and to fill in all the gaps. And
not all the gaps,
everything.
Some of the gaps.
We won't fill in any of the gaps. So, all right, been a great episode of
Brent and Ryan in the morning.
We'll see you guys later.